My friend Keith has an uncle named Mick who has dementia. To make a long story short, Uncle Mick typically stays with Keith's grandmother, but she was away in Florida for the week with a church group. Since Keith had a business trip scheduled for a few days, he asked me to house sit and take care of Uncle Mick while he was gone. This meant I was in charge of looking after him during my stay. The first day of my house sitting was fairly uneventful. I spent most of the time relaxing in the backyard, reading and soaking up the sun, or inside watching TV in the living room. I made 2 meals that day, each time setting aside extra food for Uncle Mick, but I never saw him come out of his room upstairs. I figured he was just staying in there, so I went upstairs to his door and knocked lightly, letting him know I had made some food for him. When I knocked, I heard a grunting noise from the other side of the door, which I took as some form of acknowledgement, though it struck me as a little odd. I never actually met Uncle Mick. Keith had never introduced us when he hired me, but Keith assured me that his uncle was aware of my presence. Still, despite being in the house with me, Uncle Mick never came downstairs to eat, so I went back downstairs and settled in the spare room for the night, leaving the door slightly ajar so I could hear what was going on. Later that night, I heard a door opening down the hall, followed by quick, heavy footsteps moving rapidly down the stairs. Seconds later, I heard the same footsteps racing back up the stairs, and then the door slammed shut. The intensity of the footsteps made me uneasy, almost as if Uncle Mick was trying to avoid me or was in some kind of distress. I couldn't explain it, but it was unsettling, to say the least. The second day was similar to the first. I made 2 meals again, left them out on the counter for Uncle Mick, and went outside to lay in the backyard. When I came back inside, I noticed that the food had been eaten. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I looked up toward the window of the room where Uncle Mick was staying. To my surprise, I saw him standing there, staring at me through the window. When he saw me look up, he quickly ducked out of sight. It was enough to make me feel extremely uncomfortable, so I folded up my blanket and went inside, retreating to the spare bedroom. One more night of this and I'd be out of there, I thought. That evening, I made dinner and again left the food for Uncle Mick. As I walked up the stairs to the spare bedroom, I noticed for the first time that Uncle Mick's bedroom door was open. This was the first sign of him being less reclusive, and I thought maybe he was starting to warm up to the idea of interacting. I brushed my teeth and prepared to turn in for the night, hoping he was finally feeling more comfortable. But that night, I found it hard to sleep. I was just too restless. Around midnight, I heard a faint creaking sound coming from inside Uncle Mick's room, despite the fan running. I sat up, straining my eyes to see in the darkness, but I couldn't make out anything. It was then that I realized I was becoming paranoid, questioning why I was so unnerved by Uncle Mick. I tried to ignore the sounds, but then I heard a very soft groan. I sat up again, turned off the fan, and strained my ears. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of breathing. I turned toward the far right side of the room, near the desk, and there he was, Uncle Mick, sitting on the desk chair, facing me in the dark. I screamed in shock, and before I could react, he stood up and shushed me, covering my mouth with his hand. In that moment, my first thought was that he was trying to suffocate me, so I pushed him off with all my strength and ran to the nearest bathroom, locking the door behind me. I could hear Uncle Mick's frantic footsteps rushing back down the hall, then the door to his room slamming shut. My heart was racing, and I was completely terrified. I immediately called Keith and told him what had happened, but his response wasn't nearly as alarmed as I expected. He seemed almost unfazed by it, which was even more unsettling. Keith told me that it was probably best if I stayed in the bathroom with the door locked for the night. When he said that, it dawned on me that Uncle Mick wasn't just suffering from dementia. There was something more going on with him, something dangerous. That night, I barely slept. I spent a few hours on the bathroom floor, too scared to leave. The next morning, I packed my things quickly and went to wait for Keith to return. When he came back, he paid me extra for the trouble, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Uncle Mick. I told Keith that his uncle clearly needed more help than just what he was getting for his dementia, and I honestly didn't know what Uncle Mick's intentions were that night. All I knew was that I was lucky to have gotten out of there.